Well, guys, thank you very much. That was a wonderful session. I can tell we could hear you from through the doorway. So thank you very much for taking the time to prepare and do this. Just a couple quick questions for you. This is meant to train the contracting professionals holistically and give them exposure to industry and industry's perspective. I just want to hear your thoughts. Do you think it achieved that? And what would you say to the contracting folks that are watching this that you'd want them to know as a small business industry partner, that you'd want them to know about industry when they're giving a debriefing or doing business with private sector clientele?
I think if you're starting, again, I thank you for this. I think not only are they learning, but we're learning as well too. And so I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. I think for future, the oral dialogue, having the oral debriefings is key. And I know that sometimes hearing some of the contracting officers and specialists that they're a little intimidated by that. I think we encourage it because we only want to make our proposals better and be able to offer that. But I think the communication is key. And I welcome it.
Yeah, I think from a market research perspective, I mean, that came up during the session. You know, as industry, when we respond to market research, we go through the process of not just the proposal side, but also all the business development associated with it, the meetings, et cetera. There's significant cost associated with that on our side, but we're doing it because we're really trying to understand the needs of and get to your mission and really your requirements. And so when we go through that process, we're doing that and then responding to the proposal, and we're putting the information in that response that we believe has been articulated from the government. And this was a perfect example of how we explained it, we came to the same understanding of how fantastic the solution was, and then all of a sudden it was in left field. And we felt, I came out of this feeling like, well, that was the biggest waste of money. And very honestly, I felt as though it was one of those times that the market research was done and government already had somebody in mind, and they were just looking for the 3 bids to come in. So.
I appreciated in oral feedback the opportunities for improvement. I think that's where we benefit the most. I think the other thing that we would always want the government to be focused on is specificity of requirements. I think that's clearly in this particular case study where some of the pain points were. And I know when I respond to an RFP, that's often a pain point, is the requirements are not specific enough. So it's hard to actually address the requirement in an adequate way if we don't understand it at the specificity that you want to tell it to us.
And also with that, if there is a lack, if there is an inherent, when you get the proposals and you find there's a contradiction, use the discussions as a mechanism to get that clarity. It's so frustrating to learn that a decision was made or an assumption was made about a proposal, which may not be accurate, and it's important to use the tools you have available to you to do discussions and get that clarity.
During the mock debriefing, I kind of noticed a number of points where there was some tension or dialogue between both parties. But then the contracting officer very just kind of pointedly said it's okay to disagree.
Yeah.
As a vendor, from your perspective, do you find that as a moment of opportunity to kind of lower the tension and reinforce that this is supposed to be a relationship here, that we're supposed to have an open dialogue and not to be in a position of, what do you think?
I felt like he was placating us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it did not allow us to really have an open dialogue.
Okay.
And I think that really is the most important thing. I mean, again, we are trying to work with government. When we're responding, we're not just trying to make money, right? Especially as small businesses. We're here because we want to help. And so when we go through the whole market research portion, we're trying to understand, we go through the proposal response, we're trying to understand, we're trying to provide a good solution, and then to come out on this end where he says it's okay to not agree. It's like, okay, well, just go on your way. That didn't open up that dialogue. And we do need to have that open communication so that when we come down to points where there's the ambiguity and things, that we use kind of common sense and open up that discussion and say, we might not know as much as you do. Can you explain this to us?
So, and guys, I think the goal of this session was to actually highlight some of those tensions and why it's important to communicate. It sounds like the example was proven for the audience. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know there was a lot of misinformation, and this was the hardest of the two cases in terms of there was a lot of meat in there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to work together and kind of pull this off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
very
great.
much.
Thank you.
So guys, thank you very much. This took a lot of time to prepare for. You guys done a wonderful job. We could hear the activity through the doorway. So I wanted to ask you, this was set up to give the contracting professional a holistic experience in a very safe environment because it's a made-up acquisition. You know, what are your thoughts? What are some key takeaways you have for industry or younger government personnel that are watching this? And did you learn anything from going through this process?
Jody, you want to start?
I think that everybody should go through this because people don't do debriefs often enough, especially because we don't really do a lot of Part 15 buys anymore. So I really think that everybody should go through this. And one of my takeaways was that I definitely want our CLEs to do something like this, which is our career ladder employees, our interns. The other takeaway I had was that we talked yesterday about, well, we think they're going to question us on this, this, and this, and we were exactly right. So we were sort of ready for some of the arguments that they were going to give us. So it's just having a knowledge and being aware.
I've had a really great time, honestly. It was so refreshing to be able to have an honest conversation without the fear of reprisal, such as a protest. I think if we had a situation like this in real life, we could actually help the contractors to come up with better proposals and to better understand what the government needs and to help the government push forward into requirements that will be innovative eventually. But right now, we can't rewrite the FAR, so instead the best thing to do is practice and anticipate those arguments that are going to come up. We have notes on every single thing that they said before they said it, so I really enjoyed it, and I think that we were well prepared, and Patrick did a great job addressing the concerns.
Thank you. From my perspective, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing it. Little less realistic than would be in normal life. We probably engaged on a little bit more of the topics at greater in depth than we would have. We felt that making some mistakes here and there would be actually good for the learning process and put it out there. A couple of things that we had noted before we showed up were, in normal debriefs, the vendors bring their attorneys, we bring ours. In normal debriefs, we don't, if I'm running a debrief, I'm going to be the only one talking. If I need to get information from other panel members, we're sidebarring to make sure that we're not talking about life cycle costs. But the thing that I would take away from this, and is important, we do debrief training, or at least we used to with a lot of our folks. When you're going through a tech eval and you're as a CO reviewing it, you need to be thinking like this and asking the questions, because the way we explain it to our folks is, you read the tech eval, this is what you have to go on to help the contractor understand why they didn't get it. Think as they would, go through it, and challenge and ask questions so you fully understand it. A little frustrating we couldn't have that as part of our prep for this, because there was stuff we're looking at going, oh, we're going to get killed on this. But I mean, it's a good opportunity to give feedback. I probably give more feedback than most COs, and I feel it's important to give industry a good understanding of what's going on while still protecting the government's rights and not just doing a debrief to check a box. Because I can just sit here and tell you, here are your factors, here are your weaknesses, no comments, and walk out the door. And that's not the real reason for a debrief.
Okay, and I would add that as a technical evaluator, the inclination is to want to talk shop, and it's good and important to share technical information during the debriefing, but it also has to be balanced by a caution for what you say in a debriefing type context.
Yeah, your technical folks should be saying all their talking in the documents that they handed to you, and they should be whispering in your ear to clarify it.
Thomas, did you have anything for the folks from IRS?
Yes, as part of the mock debriefing, I noticed that you had a comment about it's okay to disagree. Now, did you think that was an important moment, or did you think that was not?
When you get into a real debrief, you're going to see motions get raised and people argue. You're not going to agree. When you're sitting there telling somebody they lost a $20 million project, they do not agree that they were not the best person. They think you made a mistake. At a certain point, you need to stop that, agree to disagree, and move on, because they're not going to redo the tech eval, and I'm not going to be convinced that they're the right vendor. And at a certain point, you need to move to what is productive. It's kind of like getting into an argument with friends or family. At a certain point, you're not actually going to win that fight. Most times I lose them. And you need to move on, agree to disagree, or a polite way, however you want to phrase it, but it's important to bring closure to things.
So the reason we did this, guys, and I've said this throughout the recording, is 30% of the acquisition workforce eligible to retire within 5 years. 30% of the acquisition workforce has less than 5 years of experience on both the industry and government side. We think this is a mechanism to train people to be smarter, faster, without the risk of making a mistake in a real life environment. And I very much appreciate you kind of doing this. You guys were up against the wall in this one. This was by far the harder case, and this, I would say, it was a little bit slanted against the government. And I appreciate you taking the time to prepare and do this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.